A little addendum to our discussion yesterday about the Moshe's tshuva on Chalav Stam, Chalav Akim, Chalav Yisrael. I had heard a story about my Rebbe, and I had heard the story with Chaim Shmulevitz, but I wanted to corroborate the story. The story with Chaim Shmulevitz, according to, did not happen. This is the story that is famous. The Mir Yeshiva was saved by Rabbi Leib Malin. Rabbi Leib Malin Zecher Tzadik Kodesh Levracha. This Chedusha Rabbi Leibout was a bacher in the Mir Yeshiva, and he's the one who decided when they were in Vilna they can't stay here, and he organized it, and he was the moving force behind the Mir and moving out of Lithuania and ending up in Shanghai. So he came to the United States, and in I don't know, must have been 46 or 47. He came to the United States, and they were drinking, the world was drinking chalav. And he said, how are you talking? In Europe, that never was. What's going on? How is people drinking milk? And they said that this Yid Moshe Feinstein, he went ahead and he mated the milk. Now, this is the story according to Rav Moshe Lipka Zalzain Gezon Shtak, my Rebbe, Talmud of the Shiva. He said Shia about Shiva for many years. So according to him, Rav Leib Malin called up Moshe Feinstein. Now, Rav Moshe, fellows, was a Rav in Russia. He wasn't known on the yeshiva circuit because I think he was by yeshiva of Pesach Plaskin for a short period of time, but he was educated by his father, Rav David Zecher Tzadik Levracha. And so he wasn't known in the circles of the yeshiva. So Rav Leib Malin never heard of him. So he called him up and incredulously said, like, what are you doing? And he supposedly, he was learning at the time when my Rebbe came over after the war. They went to Jensen's farm. His daughter suffered during the war, and he wanted her to be normal. He went to this farm where she could swim. He would take her swimming. And he told me that he learned Bechavrusa of Moshe. That I can tell you, because he told me he learned Bechavrusa of Moshe. He said, he said, we went through the lines and we touched every word. I mean, I still remember saying that. And he said that Rav Leib Malin, Rav Moshe didn't want to deal with Leib Malin. He goes, did you hear of Yisrael Gusman? So he goes, Yisrael Gusman, ich hab gelernt mit dem by Grodno. Before Leib Malin went to the Mir, he was a Talmud in Grodno by Rav Shimon. So he knew the Rosh Hashiva from there. And the Rosh Hashiva corroborated Rav Moshe's Psak. The Rosh Hashiva corroborated Rav Moshe's Psak. That's the story. For some reason, I called up Hillel Ruvel. I wanted to know, because I wanted to hear about Chaim Shmulevitz, whether it was true. And he said, no, the story happened with Leib Malin, but this is the addendum. He said Rav Leib Malin was Nifta, and his Rebbetzin remarried, and was living in Arzei Abira, and Hillel Ruvel was very friendly with the Rebbetzin. He was very friendly with Rebbetzin Malin. And he said that Rebbetzin Malin said, you mean to tell me that Rav Leib Malin never heard of Rav Moshe Feinstein? Rav Michal Feinstein, his nephew, was in the Mir with them. Then you knew who Rav Moshe was. He said that Maisa is a ganze Baba Maisa. That's what he said. So now, since it's a Baba Maisa, let me tell you a much better Baba Maisa. Here's the Baba Maisa that no corroboration, but when the Mir came to New York, my nose is so itchy, I don't know why. When the Mir came to New York, Rav Chaim Shmulevitz called up Rav Moshe, and he said, who's drinking Stam here? He wanted to know. And Rav Moshe told him his psak, and Rav Moshe told him, and there's a poisik from Vilna, Rabbi Yisrael Gusman, that's oichet mated. And Rav Chaim Shmulevitz said, lebt, he's alive. He thought he had been killed in the Holocaust, like every other person in Vilna. And that's the way Rav Chaim Shmulevitz found out that the Rosh Hashiva was alive. So, since we're talking about Baba Maises, that's a much better Baba Maisa. But be that as it may, I think it's a great. Again, the psak was, like Lenny said, it's a landmark psak. The implications for us and the questions are ongoing whether the federal government doesn't go ahead and check anymore. It's on a state level. So the OU has said that it's even more even more so, you don't have to worry about it. So again, we eat those people who indulge in Haagen-Dazs or Breyers or Carvel, whatever it may be, is only because of Moshe Feinstein. And it's just, it's Baruch. Okay, we're beginning a new parak today. Think Geshmaka. Okay. Says the parak, we're beginning on Bemam and Beis. Kolat Slomim Asurim Mifnei Shehin Ne'avodim Pamachas B'Shana de Reb Meir. Now, what's a tzlem? A tzlem is it's not an avodah Zorah. It's not, in other words, it's not a known avodah Zorah. It was an image, as we're going to say, it was the image of a king, and this image, similar to the tzlem of Nebuchadnezzar, that Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah refused to bow down to. So this is what the tzlem is, and says Reb Meir that once a year they would bow down to this, they would serve it, Nevadim, they would serve it, and in Mela, it's asa behana, like any other avodah zarah. The Chachamim Maimrim, however, the Chachamim of the opinion, Eina ois asar ella kol sheyesh biyadei makol oy tzipor oy kador. The only tzlem that's asar is one that's holding in his hand a stick, a bird, or a kador, or a ball. Reb Shimon Gamliel Oimer, Av kol sheyesh biyadei kol davar. Lav dafka, these three items, but anything holding anything, you'd have a problem of perhaps avodah zarah. So we have machloikas between Reb Meir and Chachamim. Reb Meir says all tzlamim without any exception is asabah. No, the Chachamim say no. The Chachamim say it has to be holding these three things: a kador, a tzipor, or a mako. And Reb Shimon Gamliel says even what anything, if it's holding anything. That's the machloikas. Okay, just interesting. I think Rashi. Look at kador, says Rashi. Is that Pluto? Guys, Rashi, is that Pluto? Now, trust me, I think that no one could have seen Pluto so many years before, right? It's fascinating, right? This is time of the Gemara. I mean, it's Gemara Mefarish the Hani Vaday Nevadim, the Mishum Chashivuso, Ashkalu Lahanach Chefse Biyadayu. And these three things, because of the Chashivus, they're holding these three things. Okay. Fred Gemara. Eden Evadim Pamachas B'Shana, if they're served one time a year, my time in the Rabbanan. Because once it's served as a Shem Avodah Zarah, what would the reason be for the Chachamim to go ahead and saying that it's mutter ba'ana? So Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef, Rav Yochanan, b'makomo shel Meir ha'ya'ovdin pamachas b'shana. The tzlamim, not every tzlam that they serve once a year. In the place of Rav Meir, they serve this particular tzlam once a year. For Rav Meir, chayesh l'miyuta. And Rav Meir, as we know by now, is chayesh l'miyuta. We just had the sugya of the Gevina of the Gevinas Yankani, and we had Rav Meir in Yavamis. We know Rav Meir is chayesh l'miyuta. And Gaza Sham Koimes Atu Oisamakoin. And since this place it's asa, so too every other place is asa, even though this place is a miyut, is a minority regarding the rest of the world, nonetheless, what it'll be asa. For Rabbanan D'Lo Chayesh L'Miyuta, like Gaza Sham Koimes Atu Oisamakoin. So Pashut, according to Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef, the explanation of the machlokes between the two is taliwan in whether Chayesh L'Miyuta. Later Meya Chayesh L'Miyuta. So therefore, this place and there were geyser every place up to this place. So according to the Chachamim, this place is a miyut. We won't be geyser every place up to this place. Rav Yehuda Shmuel be'andarta shel malachim shaninu. When we speak about it, tzlem, what are we speaking about? We're speaking about an image of what? Of a king. Says Rashi, Andarti, Kishamelech Meis, when he would die, Oisin Surasai Bepesach Hashar L'Zikaron. They would go ahead and they make a surah of this particular king and put it in the gates of the city as a remembrance. For Hasam Ka'asar, Reb Meir. And in that place, Reb Meir would asa, the Agav Chavivusa Polchile, because of the dearness of the king, they would serve it once a year. So it was, says Shmuel, when we're speaking about the tzlem, what is the tzlem? As we said, it's not a particular god, but it's the image of a king that died. And this king, once they would put it in a public place, in this case, the Pesach of the city, once a year they would serve it, and therefore it had a shame of Avodah Zorah. See Taisus for a second. Adat Shal Malachim, the first Taisus, Pirush Kuntris, Suras Sultan Hames. Some people have guessed Suras Hamelech Hames. It's Surah one of a king. Oisun L'Zikaron. Rabbeinu Tam Pirush, Suras Sultan, Suras Melech Hachai. Oisun L'Chvaydai. He would make it what for in his lifetime. I get just like the Sfardim and the Ashkenazim, right? Like Rashi, it's only after the death. It's they name after the death. Like the Tosfos, it's like the Sfardim they name after the living. So they would go ahead and made this image after the living. We have a raya from Nebuchadnezzar that he made an image of himself and he wanted them to bow down to it. Listen to this medrash, guys. Adrianis Kesar, Polach es Rabbi Yeshua l'tayel b'Medina. That's not the one. That's another one. He was walking in the Medina, and and he showed Rabbi Yeshua the tsuras of that they made for him in his lifetime. So it's a raya that this andarta was what made by the king. Either way, it's not an avodah zarah. It's an image of a king, either a dead king or a live king, and it was served once a year according to Rabbi. The Chacham admitted it was served once a year. But since it's only in that particular place they served it, he weren't geyser up to the rest of the places. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Rabbi Barachana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, u'mo'odim al Pesach Medina Shaninu. It's speaking also where this particular of Andarte is standing at the opening of the Medina. So two things. One, it's a king, and two, it's the opening of Medina. Amar Rabba, Machloikis b'shel Kfarim. Machloikas are in the boondocks, in the kfar, in the villages. Aval b'shel krachim, in the large cities, divrei akol, even Reb Meir would be moeder, mutarim. My taima, l'noy avdi lahu. They were made there, they were made l'noy, a large city which has nice architecture, right? So there, the andarta that was made, it was made what? L'noy, and therefore what? There's no shaila, even Reb Meir would be moeder, that it's not asa b'hana. Right, Masha'en came b'kfarim in the villages. That's the machlekes. In the kfarim, in the villages, if anyone says that what they were made lenoi, in other words, I don't understand the chachamim. I don't understand the side of the chachamim. The kfarim vaday lepalchinu avdilahu. In the boondocks, why in the world would they have it there? It's not lenoi. It must be to serve. So we don't understand why the chachamim would hold in the boondocks that it's not asabahana. Ella, Lashon Charata, Iyidmar Hachiyidmar. If you want to learn Rabbi's statement, go ahead and switch it around. Amar Rabba, Machloikis B'Shel Krachim. Machloikis is in the city. There Meir says it's Lanoi. It's Leplach, to serve. And the other Chacham say it's Lanoi. Al B'Shel Kfarim, in the boondocks, Divrei Akol, even the Chachamim would admit, Isurim, that is Asa. Even the Chacham would admit that it's Asa. The Chacham Maimim, it's only Asa. Who's Asa? The ones that are holding a makal, a tzipor, v'kador. Now, what's the significance? Makal, sheroy des atzmoi, hachas kol olam kuloi kemakal. Now, I'm going to translate it literally. A stick that roy des atzmoi, that it's roy it's ruling over him, over the particular individual, hachas kol olam kuloi kemakal. So it's mashma that the stick is on top of the individual, which doesn't show that the individual is ruling over anything. So if you look at Rashi, 3 lines down, Lashon Genai Nakat. The Gemara is learning a Lashon of Genai, Kloimar, Sheroida Al Kol, that he is ruling over everything. The Gemara is saying Lashon Sagina, fellas, right? It doesn't want to say that the rule that he's holding the stick like he's ruling over everything. So he said, no, he's like under the stick. But really, what it means is Lashon Sagina, it's a sign of him being roida, being ruling over everything. So therefore, that's an avodah zarah. Tzipor, shetoifes es atzmai tachas kol olam kula tzipor. So in other words, he's like a tzipor. He flies over everything and controls everything. And again, the same lashon sagina. Kador shetoifes es atzmai tachas kol olam kula kikador. He goes ahead and holds himself underneath everything like a kador. Now, fellas, who discovered that the world wasn't flat? Talk to me. Was it
Who is Galileo?
Galileo?
That was too easy. That was only for 200.
Okay, Galileo. So now, when did he live? In the 16th century, 1500s? Okay, so look at Taisvis. That was in the 13th century. Taisvis, Kikador, Sha'olam Mogul. You needed a Galileo. Says Taisvis, the world is ugly, the world is round. Says Taisvis, the world is round. Now here's the Pelitic Yerushalmi. Listen to this. Kedishav Yerushalmi, Shal Alexandra Maikdin, Alexander the Great, although Lamaila, he was able to go up, at Shira Kalalam Kikador, till he saw the whole world like a Kador, Ves Hayom Kikaora, Pirish Yomik Yonis, so the Mediterranean, Shemach Viskol Oilam. So in other words, it's a Taisvis that the world is round. Again, just for your edification and information, and for the blog, of course. I'm saying this predates Galileo by a few hundred years. Very geschmack. Back in the Gemara, Tana, Haisifu Aleim, in addition to the stick, the tzipor, and the kador, Haisif Aleim Sayif, a sword, Atara, a crown, Utabas, and a ring. So the question is, why initially, if they were holding these three things, you weren't in Avodah Zarah. Now it is an Avodah Zarah. Makara, what happened from before till the after? Says the Gemara. Sayif meikara sava listim ba'alma, that they thought it was like he's a robber. In other words, a robber's weapon, he's holding a weapon, but it's not a sign of what of providence, of rulership. And that what? Not he's killing the world. Atara meikara sava gidul kalili ba'alma, that he was a laurel maker. That no, he's like a melech ruling over the whole world. That's the thing between before and after. Tabas meikara sava ishtaima ba'alma, right? That he was a shliach who's taking a chaysim, a signet from the one who sent him. He's signing the whole world after him, lemisa. So therefore, that's the change. In addition to what? In addition to the mako and the tzipor and the kader, you now have a sayif atara and the tabas. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says what? Anything, you're holding anything that you're holding is a sign that was an avodah zarah. Tana, afilu tzvar, even is holding a pebble. Afilu kisem, even is holding a splinter. Okay, now Gemara, you say everything. you say everything. Boy, Ravashi, tafish piyadei tzaya. What happens if he's holding some excrement in his hands? Mahu. To him, everything's cheap like tsaya, and it's a sign of rulership. Or what? That's cheap. And that's teku. Hamaitzi, says the Mishnah. Hamaitzi shivrei tzlamim. If you find broken pieces of the tzlem, harielim mutarin. They're not asiban. No, they're muta. And Rabbi doesn't seem to argue on this. Rashi, harielim mutarim. Time refers to Gemara. Dichavi shleimus. When this is important, Rashi guys. When there's shalem, suffik, bach, suffik avdum, suffik loy avdum. Guys, when the tzlem was there, it was a suffik, whether they served it or not. Good. The imtim saloima back in Rashi, avdum, ema botlum. And that's why, and I'd say that a guy can be mevatel that by the zara. And what's the raya is mevatel it? Lekach shivron. Right? Then what? He broke it. Sabi svek sveika ulakula. It's a svek sveika. Right? Guys, one suffix whether he served them or not, and sveitin's a suffix whether what? He was mevatel or not. It's a svek sveika, and therefore we'll be makel and say the broken pieces of its slem is mutter. A broken pieces of its slem man is mutter. Matzah tavnis yad or tavnis regel. If you find an image of a piece of hand or a piece of foot, harielu surim, b'nei shekiyotze behen nevad. Okay, we'll see in the Gemara what this means. In other words, even if they wouldn't serve a total slem, they might serve a hand. They might serve a foot, as we'll see. Amashmol, afilu shivei avidis kechavim. Now it said that shivei tzlomim are mutter bahana. Shmuel's mechadish afilu shivei of a known avodah zarah. A slem is a suffix. This is a vaday avodah zarah. This is a vaday avodah zarah. Good. So the kasha is Shmuel saying a bigger chiddush. Shmuel saying not only the Tana says that slem is mutter bahana, even a genoy avodah zarah that you know for sure there's no suffix is mutter bahana. For the Gemara v'anan tanan shiveit slomim, we learned broken pieces of its slem. So how could you say avodah zarah? And for the Gemara, who adin dafilu shivrei avodas kechavim? It's lav dafka at slem, but even a broken avodah zarah would be mutter bahana. V'hadik tani shiveit slomim. So why didn't you tell me the bigger chiddush? It's a much bigger chiddush to say something that you know for sure was served as an avodah zarah, that's mutter bahana, rather than something that's a suffix that was served. Because the reason why we learned slem is because you wanted to learn the din of the seifa. Matzah tavnis yad tavnis regel hari elu asurim neshekayotze ben nevad. And therefore, and you wouldn't be able to tell me that chiddush if you said an avodah zarah. You could only tell me that chiddush by its slem. Let's see Rashi, guys. Mishum de keboy lemisnei seifa. If you were to learn like Shmuel, that shivei avidis kechavim is mutter. Havamina, I would have said dafka ba'avodas kechavim hu dematzi tavnis. Right, dafka ba'avodas zarah dematzi tavnis yad tavnis regel dasrua. Aval slomim afilu tavnis yad shari. Fellas, I'd say the following: shivei avodas zarah is mutter bahana, but if you find the broken an arm or a leg, that's asa bahana. What about its slem? You say it's slem, arm and leg. I'm with the bahana. So, but it's not true. Again, tell me, the Mishnah tells us two dinim. One, it's mutter bahana that's slem, and two, if you find a hand or a foot in a certain way, it's asa. Says Shmuel, it's lav dafka slem, it's even oivik kechavim. Fred the Gemara, so why didn't it tell me oivik kechavim, a bigger chiddush? Oivik kechavim that you know for sure is asa bahana, it's the broken pieces of mutter. Certainly what? The broken pieces of its slem is mutter. And the answer is because of the seifa. If you would have told me the following, shivei avodah zarah is mutter bahana. If you find a hand or a foot of avodah zarah, it's asa bahana. What about the slem? You say that slem is mutter bahana. So, and therefore, since the slem you want to teach me is asa bahana, you learned the reshet slem. But who adin what avodah zarah? Right? Who adin avodah zarah to tell me the chiddush of the slem of the seifa, which you wouldn't have known. Very geschmack. Tanan, matzah tavnis yad tavnis regel hari elu asurim neshekayotze ben nevad, because they would serve them. Now, amai says the Gemara, amai v'shvarim ninu, they're broken, and if they're broken, mistama what? Mistama they were mevatel them. Says if they serve them. Says Tirgum Shmuel, but oimdim al besisan. They're not broken, fellas. You have some type of pedestal there, and the yad is on the pedestal, and the regel is on the pedestal. It's not a broken piece of yad, broken piece of regel lying around. It's in a format that you could see it was served with zichalein. It was served from himself. So even despite the fact that it was broken, in that realm, it's considered an avodah zarah. So therefore, that would be asa. So again, you thought what it was a broken piece of hand from its slem, or a broken piece of foot from its slem. It is, but it's on its own pedestal, its own besisan, and there is mokum yuchad, right? And therefore, what? It's asa. Itma. Avodas kechavim shenishbara me'aleha. Yeah, but now it's important to notice, fellas, that as long as a Jew is not involved, a guy can be mevatel l'shem avodah zarah. In fact, David HaMelech, who conquered many, many fights and came across a lot, he amassed a fortune of money, a fortune of spoils of war that his son Shlomo should build the Beis HaMikdash. Now, he was fighting with idol worshippers. He would come across those idol worshippers. He would come, the idols are also bahana. David had a Shabbos guy named Itai Agisi, Itai the Gathian from Gas. He will be Mavatal the Avodah Zorah. So you see a goy can be Mavatal the Shem Avodah Zorah from an Avodah Zorah. A Jewish Avodah Zorah not, but a goyish Avodah Zorah yes. Okay, it's important to know. So now, what happens if the Avodah Zorah breaks? Is that automatically a bittul or not? Does it lose the Shem Avodah Zorah or not? This is a machlokes between Gedolei Amoraim, Rabbi Yochanan, and Reish Lakish. Itma Avodas Kechavim Shenishtabra Me Alecha. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Asura. It's Asa Behana. Reish Shimon Lakish Amar Muteres. It's Muter Behana. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Asura. The Holei Batla. It seems that in other words, since it broke by itself, if he would have gone ahead, guys, look at me. If the guy would take the Avodah Zorah and throw it down, clearly that's an act of bittul. But since it broke by itself, no act of bittul was done to it. Since no act of bittul was done to it, therefore it remains an Avodah Zorah. That's asa b'hana. That's according to Rabbi Yochanan. Again, no act of bittul was done to it, and thus it remains asa b'hana. That's the din of Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish Amar Muteres Mistama Bitulim Mevatala. Even though he didn't do an action, probably he was Mevatalit. Meima Amar, he says to himself, Ihi Nafsha loy atzla, Alhu Gavra Matzlolei. This Avodah Zorah couldn't save himself. He's going to save me. So it's a svara. If he's broken, the guy must say, "Das is nishkan God. This is no God." So machloikas again says Rabbi Yochanan. If they break it up, the person breaks it by itself. Less man the polik. That's an act of what? Of bittul. But where it breaks by itself, in that scenario, says Rabbi Yochanan, since there wasn't an act of bittul done to it, no amira, no nothing, it's still asa. Says Rabbi Shimon Lakish, Meima Amar, the idol couldn't save himself. Certainly what? He can't save me, and therefore it's batal. That's the svara of what? Of Reish Lakish. Okay. Esu Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shimon Lakish. Now, here's the background. Bnei Yisrael are going to fight the Plishtim, and they go and they take the Aron. They take the Aron to war. The Aron was captured. If you remember, Eli fell when he heard that the Aron was captured. He fell and broke his neck. He died that day. And that was the case. If you remember, we discussed this earlier. They sent the Aron back with the nursing cows, with the golden hemorrhoids and the golden mice, the whole geschäft. Any place that Aron went was no good. The first thing the Plishtim did is they put the Aron in their base of Avodah Zarah. They did that. They served a god called Dagon. Dagon was a merman, like the word dog. They put it there, and the next morning, they found the whole statue had fallen down, from head to fin. Done. The next day, they set it back up. They figured it was a mikra ba'alma. They set it up, and the next day, they found it broken in half. In other words, the fin part was standing, but the man part was down and was lying on the lintel of the house. Okay, with that background, here's the kasha on Reish Lakish. Eser Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish, the Rosh Dagon, the head of Dagon, Ushtei Kapois Yadav, and his two hands, Karusais were cut, and it was lying face down in front of the Aron. Uksiv, Al Kain, therefore, Layidrichu Koihane Dagon, the Kahana of Dagon, do not walk on that threshold to this day. So what do you see? Dagon broke by itself. I mean, at least according to the way they thought, Dagon broke by itself, and still they held it was Asa. So you see, they're not Mavatal the Avodah Zarah. Kashan Reish Lakish, who says if it breaks by itself, the Avodah Zarah is batal. So Amaloi Reish Lakish said to Rabbi Yochanan, Misham Raya, there's no Raya from there. Hason Shemeniach es Dagon, they stopped worshiping Dagon, va'oivdid es hamifton, and they started worshiping the threshold. The Amalei, they said, Damahachi, Shavke isore ledagoin for asu isile ala miftan. Says Rashi. What did they do? Says Rashi. Shavke isore ledagoin givuras ushrara hatzlem, the strength and the authoritative part of the slem, azavtoi left dagoin, the holcha, and it went the yashval miftan, and it went to the miftan. And who's Isrei? Is Sar Shaloi. Isrei is the name of what? The Sar of the Avodah Zorah. Kamei Isrei Dani Yisai. So in other words, you're telling me, do you think that what? That they still served it? They didn't serve it. Dagon is finished. You know why they left the miftan? Because Dagon's kayak went into the miftan and went to the lentil. But Dagon's gone, which is what I say. If it breaks by itself, no longer does it have a shem of Avodah Zarah. So your kasha is this kind of kasha. Rabbi Yochanan wanted a taina that what they still served it. Why? Even though it broke itself. So you see, it's asa. And the answer is no. They served the miftan. They didn't serve Dagon. Dagon's gone. He died. He's dead. And therefore, what he left his kayak and went to the miftan. Now they're serving the miftan, but not Dagon. Because why? Because it's but. That's the teretz that Reish Lakish gives to Rabbi Yochanan. Esvei hamoitze shiveit slomim. If you find